Hello and welcome back to my 10 favorite people. Hope you're doing well. I'm incredibly excited for today's video because while everybody has been distracted by the narratives and hype surrounding this Bitcoin conference, expecting it to be the next major catalyst, I actually believe the biggest catalyst this week is the PCE inflation print we're going to be seeing tomorrow and the impact it's going to have on Fed rate cut expectations. And this is of course because macro is definitely in the driver's seat right now. We warned that a short-term correction was likely with the bearish engulfing candle we saw from the S&P 500 last week, and we're seeing a bit of follow through this week because of course we always say that markets absolutely hate uncertainty. So when Biden dropped out of the presidential race out of nowhere just a few months before the election, that was surely going to spook markets. And even though Bitcoin bounced pretty hard last week and was able to ignore the S&P 500 rolling over, we knew it was unlikely going to last for long, no matter how much people tried to hype up the Ethereum ETF launch, saying it was going to catalyze alt season and bring institutional capital to altcoins, the exact same way people were being very euphoric over this conference and the announcements that were going to be made and were going to change everything, and how we were going to witness history and catalyze the super cycle because of an announcement made at a conference. So this makes tomorrow very simple and straightforward for me. If we take a look at core PCE over the past year, it's been in a very clear downtrend, and the most recent print was 2.6. And if we look at the expectation for tomorrow, it's 2.6 as well. So the market is currently expecting core PCE to be flat. And if it ends up coming in below 2.6, you can expect rate cuts to be priced in even more, and you can expect the dollar index to likely get rejected here and roll over. But if you end up seeing it come in above 2.6, you can expect rate cuts to get pushed back, which would put a bit of upward pressure on the dollar, which is something Bitcoin does not enjoy whatsoever, with it having an inverse correlation with the dollar. So we really want core PCE to either come in line or below expectations if this rally is going to go any higher. And this is of course because the unemployment rate has slowly been taking its way higher month over month, which is why the Fed is kind of pressured to cut rates anyway. So the absolute disaster scenario here would be inflation rebounding or coming in above expectations while the labor market is weakening, because then that would put the Fed in a very bad place. So we'll see what this data print comes in at tomorrow. And I believe this is way more important than the Bitcoin conference everybody keeps hyping up. And that brings us to Ethereum. I don't even know where to start with this one. I have said for a while that I felt like the Ethereum ETF launch was getting a bit overhyped and too many people were expecting it to go like the Bitcoin launch did. And that is not what we ended up seeing whatsoever. We got those grayscale unlocks just like we expected, but unlike the Bitcoin one where there were some net flows that came in and counteracted the grayscale unlocks, and we ended up having net inflows, we're actually at net outflows right now after the outflows we saw yesterday, which really supports the fact that Ethereum doesn't have the same brand recognition and demand that Bitcoin does. And also anybody buying these ETFs are giving up the Ethereum staking yield, which is not an issue you have to worry about with Bitcoin because it doesn't have any yield that you're missing out on. So that further reduces the demand for these ETFs in my opinion. And we're already seeing something very different to how the Bitcoin ETF launch went, where we had positive inflows each and every day that first week, even though Grayscale was dumping a ton of money. And that is not what we're seeing this time around. And you definitely see it reflected in the chart. Very clear bearish engulfing candle right now. I feel like I've been saying that term a lot between crypto and the S&P 500, but definitely a bearish engulfing candle here. A lot of you were roasting me when I sold some Ethereum the past 2 weeks because I felt like this was an overhyped launch, and Ethereum is almost below my first sell, which I think was about 3,100, and then my second one was about 3,400. But wow, this is really some underwhelming price action, especially when you compare it to something like Solana, which is still above its 20-week moving average and above the mid-level of its 6-month consolidation range. And you could even argue that Solana is having a breakout retest right now before it potentially continues higher. But of course, a lot of that is going to rely on Ethereum and Bitcoin. But these are just two very, very different scenarios here. And I know there's people that love Solana and hate Ethereum. There's people that hate Solana because it's centralized and they love Ethereum because it's decentralized. And there's people that complain saying both are centralized and only Bitcoin matters. But I like having a little bit of diversification and exposure to various narratives. And my Solana position is kind of a hedge for my Ethereum because I do think one of them is going to be the smart contract winner. I do think it's hard to rule out Solana with how good its user interface and speed is, which I know a lot of people ignore because they say it's centralized, so none of that matters. But the market definitely seems to care based on how the performance for both of these assets is going. I mean, based on the charts, you would think Solana is the one that got the ETF and not Ethereum. But of course, it's only been 2 days. We'll see how these inflows and outflows develop over time. But as of right now, kind of what we expected with it being a sell the news event and a bit of an overhyped launch. And of course, macro selling off aggressively. Well, not too aggressively, but relative to what we've seen over the past year. I'm sure that didn't help the demand for the Ethereum ETF since we were seeing quite an aggressive sell-off in a lot of the tech stocks. On the bright side, we are still continuing to work our way through the Mt. Gox repayments. I mean, we've already overcome the German government dumping on us. We're almost done with Mt. Gox and the Bitcoin miners dumping on us. And I'm just glad that we're getting rid of all this additional supply in the summer when Bitcoin's price action tends to be pretty choppy and sideways anyway. So by the time we sort through all of it, we can maybe have a rally in Q4, which is why the normal cycle is still my base case. Just a lot of chop, maybe even revisit some slightly lower prices, shake out as many people as possible, get rid of all of that supply coming from governments, from Mt. Gox, from the Bitcoin miners, and then let some of the hype cool off before we see a rally later in the year. And of course, I'm cautiously optimistic as long as we hold that reclaim above 61.5K. And of course, we're gonna see what kind of announcements we get from this conference over the next few days and what the data print looks like tomorrow with PCE. But as of right now, really hard to gauge how low Bitcoin is going to go. Maybe 53K was the low. I'm still open to lower prices and would love to have a chance to buy at those lower prices. But as of right now, we just have to wait and see if this reclaim is going to hold or if we're going to lose the range once again, which would definitely be a short-term bear sign. So for me, Bitcoin is still in a fair value range where I'm not that excited to sell or buy at these prices. Doesn't feel overvalued to where I want to sell, doesn't feel undervalued to where I want to buy more. I'm happy I sold a little bit of Ethereum I did just to add to my cash position and prepare for some potential opportunity. And now I'm able to hold through the chop and volatility a lot easier now that I have a little more cash and a little more profits locked in. But of course, in the long term, I'm still very bullish on Bitcoin and this asset class as a whole, just like I'm bullish on the S&P 500 because I don't think money supply expansion and debt expansion is something that's going to go away anytime soon, and fiat currencies likely continue to be devalued over the long term, which is why we hold risk assets. But anyway, let me know what you expect. Were you expecting the Ethereum ETF launch to go as bad as it did? And what are you expecting for this Bitcoin conference? Will it live up to the expectations, or will it go like every other conference ever where things get overhyped, everybody gets euphoric, we see a rally going into it, and then it just ends up being a sell the news event? And of course, we'll see what happens. For now, we're going to have to see where this weekly candle ends up closing. Can we maintain above the 20-week moving average, or is Ethereum just showing us what's going to be coming for Bitcoin soon with that loss of mid-range and 20-week moving average that we saw from Ethereum, which funny enough is the asset that just got the ETF. But tomorrow should definitely be an exciting day with the volatility we're seeing in stocks and with the volatility we're going to see surrounding this PCE print tomorrow. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for the support on the recent videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.